Hi, I'm Mr. Cellini, and today we're going to practice some CRQ questions from the Global History Regents. In this video, we'll be going through the CRQ section from the January 2026 Global History Regents. Check out the links below to see my review videos for other old exams as well. This is the CRQ section in full from the last Regents that was given, okay, back in January. So, question number 1 on the Regents CRQ section is always going to be one of two things. It'll either be historical circumstances or geographic circumstances. What is this question even asking? Yeah, something that leads to something, okay? Sometimes when kids see this and they get this question, they start summarizing what is in the document. That is not what the question is asking. The question is asking what led to the stuff that's being shown in the document. Sometimes you can get a sense of the stuff that is in the document by getting a head start in looking at the source information. It says collectivization and the Holodomor. Does anybody remember anything about what a collective farm is or what kind of society uses collective farms? Communist societies are most closely associated with collective farms. Mao Zedong in China, Joseph Stalin in the Soviet Union, those are the ones you're going to want to be familiar with. So tell me about a collective farm. How does this work? Okay, the government creates these massive, super huge government-owned farms. Because remember, in communism, private property does not exist. So the government owns all the farms. They join them all together to make big, giant farms. And remember, people like Vladimir Lenin did promise peace, land, and bread. They didn't say you're going to own the land when they made that promise, but you'll have a place to go. So poor people live on government-owned lands. They work on government-owned lands. And you don't produce food to earn a profit. You produce food for your government. The government officials come to the farm and take the grain. They take the wheat, they take the corn, whatever you're growing. Your payment is what they allow you to keep. So it's not a situation in which, okay, if I work harder, I get to make more money, etc. That doesn't exist in communism, because as soon as you make more money than somebody else, you no longer have a classless society. Okay, so a collective farm, large government-owned farms. The theory goes, okay, if it's a lot of people working together on a farm, surely more people can produce more food, right? But think of it as like, I don't know, if you're asked by your teacher to do group work on a project, what happens? You get a couple of slackers and then one hard worker. Then that one hard worker goes, wait a second, these slackers get paid whether they slag off or not? I'm gonna start slacking off too. And if everyone starts slacking off on a farm whose primary mission is to grow food, what happens to your society? What happens to your country if all of the people on the farm start slacking off and stop growing food? They start starving. What's a key Regents term for starving? Famine is the term. The Regents love the word famine, F-A-M-I-N-E. So just to kind of reiterate some things here, collectivization is part of communism. Communism means everyone should be the same. Everyone's making relatively equal pay. Even if you slack off, if people start slacking off on farms, you get less food. Less food means starvation, famine. Holodomor has to do specifically with what Joseph Stalin did in the Ukraine when it comes to collective farms. Ukrainians were independent before the Soviet Union was a thing. And when the Soviet Union grabbed up Ukraine, Ukrainians were not happy about being part of the Soviet Union, not happy about being part of communism, not happy about losing control over their own lands. Does anybody remember what the Ukrainians did to resist Joseph Stalin and collective farms? Right. So the Ukrainians killed off all their animals, burned off all their crops as a way to resist. Joseph Stalin ain't happy about the situation. So what does Joseph Stalin do to the Ukrainians? You're right, he made sure they were all gonna die. Yeah, took all the food away, right? It used to be the government officials would come to your house, your collective farm, I should say, and take a lot of the food, but leave behind enough so that everyone gets to live the next day. Now he's just taken all the food the Ukrainians have to produce. And that leads to a forced famine. It's not just like accidental, oh man, we screwed up, we don't have enough food. It's like, no, I'm intentionally taking away all your food so that all your people die, okay? Give me key terms for the regions that relate to this idea that one group is being completely annihilated off the globe. Two key terms that might pop up in the regions. Genocide, you can call this the genocide of Ukrainians. What might be another one that's more complicated that you might also see? Ethnic cleansing. Okay, there is an ethnic difference between Ukrainians and Russians. Okay, so we have all that backstory. Now this is going to be a cakewalk. By the end of the 1920s, Joseph Stalin had consolidated power as the unchallenged leader of the Soviet Union. So his power got stronger. In 1928, he introduced a program to collectivize farms and end private ownership of land. Private ownership is what we do here, right? If you have a house, you own the backyard. That does not exist in communism, because if you have different sized houses, that's differences in wealth, and that's a no-no in communism, right? It's supposed to be classless. Farmers in Ukraine, known as the breadbasket of the Soviet Union, for its fertile soil, I'll explain that in a second, resisted giving up their land to the state and joining collective farms. If I call a place a breadbasket, it means it's known for producing a lot of food. The United States' Midwest region is the breadbasket of this country. Kellogg's, General Mills, those big cereal corporations are all based in like places like Minnesota, stuff like that, Idaho, because that's where all the food is grown in this country for the most part. We produce some crops here on Long Island, but way more in the middle of the country. It's all just fields of wheat. Ukraine is like that. Russia is big and cold. Ukraine is more south, a little closer to the equator, a little warmer, much more hospitable for growing food. For the sake of tangents and Regents Review, guys remember what the northern part of Russia is called, where those gulags were, the really cold part? Siberia, very nice. The Soviet state under Stalin responded with a program called dekulakization, which evicted farmers and their families. The word kulak means fist in Russian and was used to demonize private farmers who refused to open their clenched fists, and participate in building socialism. More than 1 million Ukrainian farmers were exiled to the far reaches of the Soviet Union or left without homes or work in the process, right? So somebody mentioned the labor camps, I think it was Bela. That's what's being referred to here. To be exiled means banished from their homes. It's not mentioning so much the famine stuff, but we know that to be true here. So kulak is a word that Stalin used for these Ukrainians who resisted communism. Explain the historical circumstances does not ask us to summarize this document. This is hard. Probably, in my opinion, the hardest of all the CRQ questions, because you got to remember some stuff from class. You have to ask yourself, okay, Stalin is desperately trying to make these collective farms and use communism. Does anybody remember why Stalin was so focused on increasing farming in his country? What his ultimate goal was? So he wanted to grow a lot of food for the Soviet Union to sell some of it. Think about the other goals that Stalin might have had other than the collective farm stuff. His other goals would require a lot of money because you can't just make it happen out of thin air. What is Stalin's bigger plan for the Soviet Union? Industrialization. How many years plans? 5-year plans. Building factories costs money. Natural resources cost money. He wanted to grow extra food if possible with this group work on these farms to produce enough food to sell, to make money for industrialization. Those of you who had me in class, we watched a video about this process. That is the backstory for why he's doing this. That's not the only possible answer. You could go back even further. Does anybody remember who brought communism to the Soviet Union or Russia in the first place? Because that's good backstory, because without this guy, there's no communism there. Mr. Peace, Land, and Bread himself. Vladimir Lenin, Bolshevik Revolution, peace, land, and bread. If you wrote about that here, that would count as historical circumstances. Okay, so my point is with all this, guys, I know I'm being long-winded here, but this is a good learning experience. There could be multiple answers to this that would count. Here's what I'm going to write down. The Soviet Union, you don't have to restate the question. Save yourself some time on the regents, but do use complete sentences. Union wanted to industrialize after falling behind the West in terms of technology. I recommend 2 sentences if you can, because it does say explain, right? So explain means talk a little bit about how or why, or both if you can. So I'm going to say here, collective farms were meant to generate income, which is a fancy word for money, needed to fund 5-year plans. That's one possible answer. All right, so it's backstory for the document. What was I going to ask you guys? 5-year plans. Okay, so this answer here about falling behind. They did fall behind. Can you give me proof that Russia was behind other countries? Maybe they got their butts kicked in a certain war so badly that they said, forget it, we're going to quit midway through. World War I, Russia got its butt kicked in World War I. Even before that, in 1904 and 1905, Japan beat Russia in a war. Japan's tiny. Russia's the single biggest country on the planet. And that kind of signaled to the world that Russia's falling behind. Stalin's trying to make up for lost time. Really, it kind of all goes back to 9th grade when the Mongols isolated Russia, but you don't need to know about Mongols for the regents. I shouldn't have even brought it up. I apologize. Let's move on. Next one. Now that we're having fun, right? Moving on, here we go, next page. So here on the bottom, I've got something else about Ukraine, and now I see the word famine. It's good to know that word, right? Dying of starvation. This one says, and this is the reason why I'm doing this with you guys, because sometimes on the Regents, they like to put these confusing ones. Explain how the intended audience affects what this person included in her testimony. Audience who the person is talking to. Whenever an audience is in existence, you kind of tailor what you have to say to those people. I like to give the example in class of, like, let's say I'm giving a speech at Yankee Stadium about the best baseball teams of all time. The audience at Yankee Stadium is Yankee fans. So if I want to give a speech in front of Yankee fans and make them happy and not get stuff thrown at me, I say nice things about the Yankees and I make fun of the Mets and the Red Sox. Right? So that's me tailoring my speech to that audience. I would talk differently about history to you guys than I would talk to my 2-year-old about history, right? Sometimes my wife teaches at a college. If I go to that college and I talk to those students about history stuff, how I present the history would change for them as well. So the point is, our audience always affects how we talk. This person is going to be asked by people in the United States about her experiences in Ukraine in the 1980s, okay? During the Cold War, we didn't know a lot about what was going on in the Soviet Union, right? That was a time period of the Iron Curtain and secrecy. So she's gonna try to do her best to educate people in the United States about this situation so that maybe we could take some steps to help solve these problems. Well, let's take a look. In 1986, the United States Congress established the Commission on the Ukrainian Famine. The commission was made up of members of the House of Representatives, the Senate and the Department of State, and the Ukrainian American community. So 2 House legislature, right? That's for next year. But House of Representatives and the Senate are our 2 branches or 2 departments in the Congress where we make laws. The commission was established to study the 1932 to 1933 Ukrainian famine and provide the American public and the world with a better testimony, or rather, try that in English, with a better understanding of the Soviet role in the famine. The following excerpt is from the testimony of Ms. Tatiana Pawliczka, a surviving person, a survivor of the Ukrainian famine. So what I'm going to highlight here, and they often do this when you get these audience questions, they tell you what the audience is or who the audience is. So where was it? When she was talking, it was members of the U.S. House of Representatives, the Senate, Department of State. It's United States legislators, lawmakers. That's the audience. If this is confusing, it'll get more clear in a second. I know this source is long. In 1932, I was 10 years old, and I remember well what happened in my native village in the Kyiv region. Kyiv is the capital of Ukraine. In the spring of that year, we had virtually no seed. If you have no seed, you can't grow anything. The communists had taken all the grain, just like we talked about. In fact, let's highlight that. And although they saw that we were weak and hungry, they came and searched for more grain. My mother had stashed away some corn that had already sprouted, but they found that too, and took it. What we did manage to sow, meaning plant, the starving people pulled up out of the ground and ate. In the villages and on the collective farms, a lot of land lay fallow, meaning not planted, because people had nothing to plant, and there wasn't enough manpower to do the sowing. Again, sowing in this case is planting. Most people couldn't walk, and those few who could had no strength. When at harvest time there weren't enough local people to harvest the grain, others were sent in to help on the collectives. These people spoke Russian, and they were given provisions. This is also part of Stalin's grand plan. He's like, okay, Ukrainian people are a threat. I'm going to have these people killed off via starvation, and then I'll move Russians in, and I'll Russify Ukraine He's trying to make everybody in the Soviet Union be the same in terms of culture, same ideas to keep his country together, which is not nice, right? He's basically trying to eliminate a whole group of people. I'll try to go as fast as I can. After the harvest, the villagers tried to go out in the field to look for gleanings, meaning leftover crops, and the communists would arrest them and shoot at them and send them to Siberia, right? Off to the gulag you go. My Aunt Tatiana was taken away. They said she had stolen the property on the collective farms. That summer, vegetables couldn't even ripen. People pulled them out of the ground, still green, and ate them. People ate leaves, nettles. By autumn, no one had any chickens or cattle. Here and there, someone had a few potatoes or beets. People coming in from other villages told the very same story. They would travel all over trying to get food. They would fall by the roadside, and none of us could do anything to help. Before the ground froze, they were left there dead in the snow, or if they died in the house, they were dragged out to the cattle shed and they would lie there frozen until spring. There was no one to dig graves. So when you answer a question like this, I would recommend doing two things. First, tell the reader who the audience is. So here's what we're going to do. Take a look. We're going to say the audience consisted of members of the U.S. government. Start with that. If you can't read that, let me know. I'm going fast and my handwriting is, as my kids know, not great. The audience consisted of members of the U.S. government. Right, so think about that. It's 1986. It's the Cold War. It's a time period of secrecy. U.S. people have no idea what's happening in the Ukraine. So what is she putting in this speech that might be of interest to the lawmakers? Or what is she, another way of thinking about this is what might she be able to accomplish in talking to them? This is tough. I know this is very hard. If we can't get it, I'll tell you, but let's see what we can come up with. Probably her goal, right? If this question was about purpose, probably her goal is to convince them to pass some laws to maybe help these people. So I think her first step in delivering this testimony is to educate, right? To let these people know what's going on. So she chooses to include the key details about all the suffering. Okay? If her goal is to educate, you got to tell people what's going on. So look at what I'm going to write, and this will make more sense. So we're going to say, therefore, she included details about the famine in Ukraine, comma, such as food being taken by the government, period. Okay? If this is an audience of people who have no idea what's going on in Ukraine, I'm thinking to myself, her goal is to educate. So what does she do? She includes key details about the event, and I gave a specific example to support it. That's all. That's all I'm doing with these. Who's in the audience? Think about what that person might know or not know. They're not going to know anything about this. So she's just trying to educate them about the basics. That's all. Simple as that. Next, cause and effect. Guys, when you get a cause and effect, your goal is to not provide a cause and effect for each document. Does anyone remember the best way to go about this cause and effect stuff? Explain how the stuff from document 1 led to the stuff in document 2. So think about it as doc 1 is cause, doc 2 is effect. That's how you should think of this. To start this, you want to establish a relationship. Instead of saying document 1 led to document 2, we're going to give the main idea from document 1, and then we're going to give the main idea from document 2. So here's how I'm doing that. Stalin's collective farms led to a famine in Ukraine. Collective farms is the main idea from document 1. Famine is the main idea from document 2. That's identifying a cause and effect relationship. We have to explain now. How does collective farms lead to famine? Explain it to me. This is because. Nice way to tell the reader I'm about to explain something. Ukrainians resisted giving up their land, comma, and the Soviet government responded by taking away all of the food in Ukraine. I want you guys to notice something. See how I'm not filling up this entire page? Nobody has time for that. At most, legit, at most on a CRQ, 3 sentences is all you need. Okay? Cause and effect, 2 covers it. Main idea, document 1 led to. Main idea, document 2, another sentence explaining the connection. Well, that's it. Don't fill this up. Believe me, if you want to write an essay, you'll have plenty of opportunities to do that on the Enduring Issues essay. Not here. Don't waste your time. Oftentimes what kids do, if they're not trained on how to do this properly, they start quoting massive chunks of text from each document. Why? And I get why. Because it says, use evidence from both documents in your response. And I think kids see that sentence and go, oh, that must mean I got to quote from the documents. No. As long as you refer to the information in the documents, you're using evidence. Using evidence does not have to mean quoting evidence. Paraphrasing is also acceptable. That's putting it into your own words. And we did that right here. That's it. If you don't believe me, go on the New York State website and look at the answer key. This is way more than what they accepted as being correct. 2 maps. I like it when it's pictures. I don't know how you guys feel about that. Europe 1914, Europe 1923. What giant event in history started in 1914? World War I. For the sake of review, does anybody remember some of the causes for World War I? What's that word we use for when one country is taking over land somewhere else? Imperialism, right? Remember your mania? Hopefully your teacher went over this. Mania, causes of World War I. Militarism, alliances. The N is nationalism. The I is imperialism. And the other A is assassination. Cool. Does anybody remember why the Archduke was killed? This is the hard part. You're right, it was nationalism. It's hard to see on this map here. Let me zoom in a little bit. A little blurry. But there's a place down here called Serbia. The people who live in Serbia have a culture. Most of the people in Serbia have a culture, or you want to call it an ethnic group that lives there. That's also similar to the ethnic group that lives in Russia. What do we call that ethnic group? Slavic people. Yes, Slavic people. I know you probably are not that familiar with that term, okay? Being Slav, it's a cultural group. Just think of it like that. Slavs did not have their own country. Some lived in Serbia, some lived in Russia, some lived in Romania, Bulgaria. What they wanted was to unify into one country. Just like Otto von Bismarck wanted to unite all the German people into one country instead of several countries. Because if your culture is united, your culture can be stronger. So that's what the Serbians wanted. They wanted all the Slavic people to have their own country. But Austria-Hungary came in and took over this little hunk of land right here called Bosnia, where Slavic people lived. And Serbia's like, yo, no, you can't be doing that. I wanted to join my country together with Bosnia as part of this unification process. So Serbia's ticked off. Serbia's tiny, Austria's big. So what do? They resort to an act of terrorism to stick it to Austria. The Archduke Franz Ferdinand is taking a tour of the capital city of Bosnia in a convertible, and he gets shot, and his wife gets shot. So why does this lead to a world war? You'd think there would just be a war between Serbia and Austria. That's what would make sense to me, but that's not what happened. How come? Because of alliances, right? So Russia had Serbia's back. Why? Because they both have Slavic people live in both. German people are similar to Austrian people. Germany's got Austria's back. France has, you don't have to write this down or draw these arrows. France has Russia's back. Britain always has France's back. Okay? All these countries start having each other's backs. Boom, you got yourself a world war. Why a world war? Because the colonies of these places also had to participate. Remember, Indian soldiers helped the British in the world wars. And eventually, even the United States gets involved. Okay, so some good review. The maps changed, though. Before World War I, after World War I, things look a little bit different. What happens, or what's different, generally speaking, on the right? Austria-Hungary Empire, gone. It's not in this map, but the Ottoman Empire, also gone. And in the place of that, you get several new countries. You get a smaller Austria, you get a Czechoslovakia, a Hungary, a Yugoslavia. This is because when World War I was over, they said, okay, World War I started because Slavic people were mad because they didn't have their own country. So let's give them their own country. They won't be mad. They won't start another war because happy people don't fight with each other. That was the philosophy. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. So the map changes. The map changes to give as many groups as possible a country of their own because that's what they thought would make people happy. If I can run my own country, I won't be mad, and mad countries don't fight with each other. But look at this question, now that we have some backstory. Geographic context or geographic circumstances. This is another reason why I'm doing this one with you guys, because this one does not come up a lot. Geographic circumstances, geographic context means what is going on with land stuff that connects to the history. The land stuff is the separation of empires into separate countries. That's what's happening on the land. So take a look at what I'm going to write down, and then I'll tell you why it works. Ready? The map of Europe changed after World War I. in order to give groups countries of their own. What's happening with the land that influences the history. That's all we have to do for this one. Explain the point of view of the US President, Woodrow Wilson. Because somebody remind me what this question is asking when it's asking about point of view. Author's opinion. So in this case, the author is the US President, Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson was the guy representing the United States in Paris that helped create the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, he wanted to try to keep a lasting peace. He creates the idea of the League of Nations in order to help do that. So this is wordy. We can maybe skip around a little bit for the sake of time here. Gentlemen of the Congress, it is that the world be made fit and safe to live in, and particularly that it be made safe for every peace-loving nation, which, like our own, wishes to live its own life, determine its own institutions, be assured of justice, yada, yada, yada. Please highlight. I'll tell you why in a second. World made safe, every peace-loving nation wishes to live its own life. This is government speak for people are happy if they have the ability to live on their own without interference. And happy countries don't fight with each other, which makes the world safe. That's what he's saying here so far. The peoples of Austria-Hungary, whose place among the nations we wish to see safeguarded and assured, should be accorded the freest opportunity of autonomous development. This is government speak for all the different groups of the former Austria-Hungary Empire should be able to live autonomously. If I'm living autonomously, I'm independent. That's a big vocabulary term. Romania, Serbia, and Montenegro should be evacuated, occupied territories restored, Serbia accorded free and secure access to the sea, and the relations of the several Balkan states to one another, determined by friendly counsel along historically established lines of allegiance and nationality. Oh my goodness, it's very wordy, right? The Turkish portions of the present Ottoman Empire should be assured a secure sovereignty, but the other nationalities which are now under Turkish rule should be assured an undoubted security of life and unmolested opportunity for autonomous development. This is saying that the Ottoman Empire is going to be carved up into new places. Woodrow Wilson wanted them to be independent. There's that word autonomous again. For the sake of review, what happened to those territories of the Ottoman Empire when World War I was over? They became what? Become mandates. Okay, a mandate is a key term we use for temporary colony. Instead of independence, which is what the US president wanted, the British and the French roll in and go, no, I don't think so. I'm taking Palestine, I'm taking Iraq, I'm taking Syria, and that causes problems later on. Explain the point of view the US president had regarding what should happen in Europe. Yes, he wanted people around the world to be able to have their own country, their own government, because that is what is going to make people happy and therefore peaceful. Let's write it down. His point of view was, I don't have to write down Wilson, his point of view was, groups in Europe should be able to rule themselves. I'll say have their own country and rule themselves. Because it says explain, the word because indicates explanation, that would help keep world peace. Here's the last reason why I'm doing this CRQ with you guys, because this one does not come up very often, and it's not easy. And it's one of those that's going to definitely require 3 sentences. A turning point is a major event in history that causes change to happen. And the best way to think about this is ask yourself, what the heck happened between document 1 and document 2 that caused all this history stuff to change? So what's the thing that caused the map to change and Woodrow Wilson saying, yo, we should break up Austria-Hungary. We should break up the Ottoman Empire. World War I is your turning point, because before World War I, Austria is big and has power over other groups. After World War I, Austria is gone and all those places are now independent. So watch how I'm going to answer this one. The first thing we have to do, if you look at the instructions, is identify the turning point. This is where we tell the reader the event that happens in between the documents that makes the change happen. So World War I is the turning point that takes place between the documents. I'll say the history in each document. That's step 1. That gets you 1 point out of 2. Explain is the harder point, but it's really not. It's really not that bad. Using information from docs 1 and 2. That does not mean massive quotes from docs 1 and 2. You can't quote document 1 anyway. You have to paraphrase. So to show turning point, you have to show change. That means you have to talk about the before and then the after. Document 1 is the before, document 2 is the after. So I'll say before the war, comma. We'll say some groups in Europe, comma, such as the Slavs, were ruled by empires like Austria, period. That is me paraphrasing something I saw in document 1. Now we do after the turning point, right? So after the war, comma, new countries were created in order to give groups independence. Maybe I'll drop in self-determination to sound extra smart. It's always my goal. Make people think I'm smart, comma, which was supposed to help keep peace. Obviously, this idea failed miserably because you have a sequel to World War I called World War II. Again, I know I went off the lines a little bit, but I did not fill up a whole page. 3 sentences. Turning point identification is sentence 1. Before is document 1 stuff, that's sentence 2. After is document 2 stuff, that's sentence 3. And there's our complete answer.